She lived in a small town where most people knew each other, but she felt invisible. She spent her days quietly moving through life, keeping her head down and avoiding attention. She worked at a little bookstore, arranging books on the shelves, helping people find what they needed and answering simple questions. No one thought much about her, and she liked it that way. Life was predictable, and there was comfort in that. Yet inside her, there was something that pulsed quietly but strongly, a love for music, and especially the piano. She had grown up with the piano in the corner of her living room. It was an old instrument, worn from years of use, but it had a warm sound that could reach deep into her soul. Every evening, after the world outside became quiet, she would sit at the piano and let her fingers move across the keys. Sometimes she played slowly, almost like she was telling a story in whispers. Other times, she would let her emotions pour out in faster, more urgent movements. Music was her escape, her friend, her secret world where no one could judge her or misunderstand her. People around her often didn't understand her. They noticed her quietness and her love for music, but they never really saw the fire inside her. They thought of her as shy or reserved, someone who preferred to stay in the background. But in that quiet, something extraordinary existed. She could make the piano sing in ways that made her heart race and tears form in her eyes. Each note had a life of its own. She was the one who gave it breath. Even as she went about her daily routine, her mind often wandered back to the piano. She imagined performing in front of others, letting the music fill a room, and watching faces light up with surprise and awe. But then reality would creep back in, reminding her of who she was in the world. People in her town didn't expect grand performances from someone like her. No one would ask her to play anywhere outside of her home. It was easier to dream than to face the disappointment of trying and failing in front of others. One afternoon, while arranging books, the shop owner came to her with a small request. There was a community event happening at the town hall, and they needed someone to play music in the background. It was meant to be simple, a few songs while people mingled, nothing formal or serious. She almost refused at first, thinking it was not worth the trouble. But the shop owner insisted, saying that she had a way with music that made people feel something special. Even if it was quiet, her heart raced at the thought. This was different from the private world she created at home. This was real, and people would actually be listening. The thought of someone judging her, noticing her mistakes, or thinking she wasn't good enough made her stomach twist. But at the same time, there was a small spark of excitement. She could almost hear the piano in her mind, the first notes floating through the hall, delicate but full of life. She knew she had to try. The days leading up to the event were filled with practice. She spent hours at the piano, working through pieces she loved and trying new ones that scared her. Each evening, the quiet of her home was filled with sounds, sometimes soft and hesitant, sometimes bold and commanding. She discovered parts of herself she had never explored, emotions she hadn't given a name, and stories that lived only in her fingertips. She practiced until her hands ached and her eyes grew heavy. But she kept going because the music demanded it. At times, she felt unsure if she could do it. What if she made a mistake in front of all those people? What if they didn't like her music? Fear crept in, and she would step away from the piano, trying to calm her racing heart. She reminded herself that music was her language, that it didn't need to be perfect to be beautiful. Slowly, she began to trust herself, realizing that the piano had always been a part of her that no one could take away. On the day of the event, she arrived early at the town hall. The space was large, filled with chairs and tables, and the echoes of voices bounced off the walls. People were setting up decorations and arranging food, moving with excitement and chatter. She felt small among the activity, almost invisible again. The piano stood in the corner, waiting silently. It was familiar, yet now it seemed to have a presence of its own, like it knew something important was about to happen. She sat at the piano and ran her fingers lightly over the keys. The first note trembled in the room, soft but clear. A few people looked in her direction, curious, but most were busy with their tasks. She closed her eyes and let her hands move naturally, trusting the music to guide her. Slowly, the notes began to fill the hall, weaving through the conversations and laughter, capturing attention without demanding it. Something surprising happened. As she played, the room changed. People paused, their voices quieting as the melody wrapped around them. The music was gentle at first, like a whisper, but it grew with emotion, carrying stories of longing, hope, and quiet joy. She felt her own heart open with every chord, connecting to something bigger than herself. It was as if the piano was telling everyone in the room a secret, a truth they had forgotten. She noticed people looking at her now, faces softening, eyes widening with recognition. It wasn't just that they were hearing music, it was that they were feeling it. Some smiled, some closed their eyes, and some even wiped away tears they hadn't expected. She played on, forgetting herself completely, lost in the sound she was creating. The piano was no longer just an instrument, it was a bridge between her and everyone around her, a way to speak without words. Time seemed to shift. Moments that should have felt ordinary stretched into something extraordinary. She lost track of the number of songs she had played, or how long she had been at the piano. Each note mattered, each pause was deliberate, and the room seemed suspended in a perfect balance. She had never experienced anything like it, and the people in the hall had never witnessed such a presence from someone they thought they knew. When she finally stopped, there was a quiet that seemed heavier than any applause could be. The room was still for a heartbeat, and then the sound of clapping began, soft at first and then growing louder. People approached her, their faces full of awe and admiration, telling her how beautiful the music had been, how it made them feel alive in a way they hadn't felt in years. She smiled, overwhelmed by the response, and for the first time, she truly believed in the power of her own gift. That night, as she walked home, the streets were calm and the stars shone brightly above. She felt different, lighter, and more certain of herself. The world had seen her in a way it never had before, and she realized that the quiet life she had once valued so much could now expand into something far bigger. The piano, her constant companion, had opened a door she had not known existed. She had stepped into it, and life for the first time felt limitless. The next morning, she woke up with her mind buzzing. Her performance the day before kept playing over and over in her head. She felt excitement, but also a strange kind of fear. People had seen a side of her that no one in town had ever noticed before. Some had smiled at her music, some had stared in surprise, a few had whispered to each other, as if they could not believe what they had heard. It was the first time she felt that the world might see her differently, and the idea made her uneasy. She was not used to attention. She didn't know how to handle it. As she walked through the streets of her small town, she noticed people looking at her more than usual. Some nodded politely, others stopped and smiled. There were even a few people she had known for years who now seemed curious, almost eager to talk to her. She felt a strange mix of pride and anxiety. Could she really live up to what they expected of her now? She wondered if she could continue to create music that moved people, or if it was just a lucky moment one night when everything fell perfectly into place. At home, she tried to return to her piano, but it felt different. Before, the piano had been her private world, a safe place where she could make mistakes and experiment freely. Now, it seemed heavier, full of the expectations she felt from others. She hesitated, her hands hovering above the keys, unsure if she could bring the same magic to the instrument again. She closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and reminded herself that music was hers. The piano would always listen without judgment, and the notes would follow her heart if she let them. She started to practice again, slowly at first. Each note was deliberate, measured, and filled with careful thought. She was more conscious of sound, timing, and emotion than ever before. Sometimes she stumbled, her fingers forgetting the rhythm she had practiced so many times before. Frustration rose in her chest, but she forced herself to continue. She knew that growth would come from persistence, and that she could not avoid challenges if she wanted to truly embrace her talent. During her practice, she thought about the people at the event and how their reactions had affected her. Some faces had shone with joy, some had seemed lost in thought, and a few had even looked moved to tears. The memory of those moments made her heart beat faster. She realized that music had power not just over her own emotions, but over the people who listened. It was a gift, a way to reach inside someone else's heart without needing to speak. That thought alone gave her courage. She continued to play with more confidence. Despite this growing determination, doubts still lingered. She worried that she was not ready for a larger audience, that her hands might falter, or that she could never recreate the feeling she had shared the night before. The thought of failure was frightening. Ange spent hours pacing her room. Wrestling with her own insecurities, she knew that stepping into the spotlight again meant risking disappointment. But she also understood that avoiding it would keep her confined to a life half-lived. Her parents noticed her restlessness and offered gentle encouragement. They had always supported her music, even if they did not fully understand it. They reminded her that her talent was a gift and that the world needed to see it. Their words comforted her, but she still felt nervous. Performing in front of others was not easy, and the weight of expectation made her hands shake whenever she thought about it. As the day of another community event approached, she became more aware of her nerves. The hall was bigger this time, and more people would attend. She practiced daily, repeating songs, trying new melodies, and experimenting with emotion in every chord. Some evenings, she stayed at the piano until her fingers ached, pouring every ounce of herself into the music. With every practice, she felt her confidence grow, but the fear never fully left. She knew that the real challenge would come when she played for others again, when she could not retreat into the safety of her room. On the morning of the event, she woke early, feeling a mixture of anticipation and anxiety. She dressed simply, wanting to be comfortable, yet she chose clothes that made her feel confident. She carried a small bag with sheet music and a few personal items, as if preparing for a journey. The streets were quiet as she walked to the hall, the sun casting soft light across the town. She noticed a few familiar faces already arriving, setting up tables, arranging chairs, and moving decorations. Their chatter and laughter reminded her that she was stepping into a space alive with energy and life. Inside the hall, she saw the piano waiting for her, familiar and yet commanding attention. It was a beautiful instrument, polished and gleaming under the light. She approached it slowly, feeling a moment of hesitation, and then sat down. Her hands trembled slightly as she lifted them above the keys, remembering the first time she had felt music flow through her. She closed her eyes and took a deep breath, letting the nervousness fade into focus. The audience might be bigger this time, but the piano would not judge her. It would allow her to express herself fully, just as it had always done. As she played the first notes, she felt the familiar magic return. The sound filled the room, soft at first, then growing richer and more vibrant. People stopped what they were doing, turning their attention toward her. She could sense their curiosity, their anticipation, and she let it fuel her performance. The music flowed naturally, each note carrying emotion, telling a story that words could not capture. She felt herself merging with the piano, no longer just a player but a vessel for the sound, a medium through which music could speak. The audience was captivated. Conversations died down, eyes widened, and some people even held their breath, caught in the moment. She noticed how the music seemed to touch each person differently. One woman smiled, her eyes glistening with tears, while a man in the back leaned forward, his expression thoughtful and moved. Children stopped playing and listened, their small faces full of wonder. The hall became alive in a new way, filled with an invisible connection between her and everyone present. She played song after song, allowing herself to explore emotions she had never expressed before. Sometimes the music was gentle and reflective, like a quiet afternoon. And other times, it was powerful and urgent, like a storm breaking through silence. She let herself feel every note, letting it rise and fall naturally, and the audience followed her without hesitation. Each piece was a conversation, a sharing of thoughts, fears, joys, and dreams. She realized that music could bridge gaps between people, heal invisible wounds, and create understanding without a single spoken word by the end of her performance. The hall was silent for a moment, as if everyone was savoring the last note and letting it linger in the air. Then, slowly, the sound of applause began, growing louder with each clap. People approached her afterward, speaking softly, praising her talent, and expressing how deeply they had been moved. She felt a warmth in her chest, a mixture of pride, relief, and happiness. The fear she had carried for so long began to fade. replaced by a sense of purpose and possibility. Walking home later, she thought about how much had changed in just a few days. The world outside had begun to notice her, and more importantly, she had begun to notice herself. The music that had once been a private escape had become a way to connect with others, a means to share her inner world and touch lives in ways she had never imagined. She knew that challenges would come, that there would be moments of doubt and fear. But she also knew that she had found a part of herself that was strong, resilient, and ready to grow. That night, she returned to her piano, her hands hovering over the keys, feeling a renewed sense of excitement. The music was no longer just an escape. It was a path forward, a way to explore life, emotions, and human connections. She played late into the night, allowing herself to dream, to create, and to feel alive. She understood now that the journey had only just begun. She was ready to face whatever came next with courage, passion, and the music that flowed through her very soul. The next performance came quickly. This time, it was not just a small event in the town hall, but a gathering of people from nearby towns as well. She felt her stomach twist with nervousness as she walked toward the hall. She carried with her a small notebook of sheet music, a few handwritten notes, and a heart filled with both hope and fear. She had practiced relentlessly in the days leading up to this moment, yet she still worried about what could go wrong. What if her hands trembled? What if she made a mistake? The thought of failure lingered in her mind like a shadow she could not shake. Inside the hall, the atmosphere was buzzing with anticipation. People were chatting, laughing, and moving about, unaware of the quiet storm brewing inside her. She walked toward the piano with careful steps, feeling the weight of all eyes upon her. The instrument stood under a soft light, polished and proud. She took a deep breath and let her fingers rest gently on the keys. Trying to calm the rush of nerves that threatened to overwhelm her, she closed her eyes, remembering the moments at the previous events, and focused on the music that had carried her so far. The first note she played trembled, soft and uncertain. But as she continued, the sound grew stronger, more confident. The melody flowed naturally, and she felt the familiar sense of connection with the piano. Each note was like a heartbeat, steady and alive, and with every chord, her fear began to melt away. She realized that the music had a life of its own, one that could carry her beyond worry and hesitation. She let herself become part of that life, and the room slowly began to respond. People turned their attention to her. Conversations ceased, and the murmur of the audience became a quiet hum in the background. She felt the eyes of strangers on her, and it both terrified and thrilled her. Yet, with every note, she felt a sense of calm. The music was a bridge, connecting her to those around her without the need for words. She saw faces soften, smiles emerge, and even a few tears glisten in the eyes of those who were listening closely. It was a moment of shared humanity, a silent conversation that only music could carry. As she played, her emotions poured into every movement of her hands. Some songs were gentle, almost fragile, like the delicate touch of sunlight on a windowpane. Others were bold, full of energy, as if she were speaking directly to the hearts of the audience. The piano responded to her, echoing her feelings and amplifying them, creating a world inside the hall that existed only in that moment. She felt a thrill she had never experienced before, a sense that she was not just playing music, but telling a story that could be felt by everyone present. The room seemed to shift. Time became fluid, stretching and bending around the music. People forgot where they were, forgetting their phones, their worries, and their small daily concerns. Some closed their eyes to focus solely on the sound, letting it wash over them like a warm wave. Others leaned forward, captivated by the intricate dance of her fingers across the keys. Children who had been running and laughing became still, listening with wide eyes. She saw expressions of wonder and quiet reverence, and it made her heart swell with both pride and humility. For a while she forgot herself completely. She was no longer a quiet woman from a small town. She was a conduit for something larger, a messenger of emotion that could reach beyond words. Her doubts and fears vanished, replaced by the pure joy of creation. Every note mattered, and every pause had purpose. She felt alive in a way she had never known. Fully present in the moment and entirely at home with the piano beneath her fingers, people began to respond in ways she had not anticipated. Some were visibly moved, brushing away tears or placing a hand over their heart. Others nodded slowly, as if they understood something about themselves they had forgotten. She felt the power of music to reveal hidden emotions, to connect people through feelings they could not explain. It was humbling and empowering all at once, and she felt a deep gratitude for the gift she had been given. Her confidence grew with each song. She took small risks, adding subtle variations and improvisations that brought a new layer of emotion to the performance. The audience reacted instinctively, leaning into the changes, feeling the shifts in mood and tempo. She realized that this was the moment she had been preparing for her entire life, not just the practice. Not just the notes, but the ability to touch lives through her art. It was exhilarating, terrifying, and beautiful all at once. By the time she reached the final piece, the hall was completely silent except for the music. She poured all of herself into the last song, feeling the crescendo build and then fall gently into a delicate conclusion. The last note lingered in the air, vibrating softly, and for a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then the room erupted into applause. People stood, clapping and cheering, their faces lit with admiration and amazement. She felt a rush of emotion, tears forming in her eyes as she realized that the connection she had felt with the piano had extended to every person in that hall. After the performance, people approached her, some shaking her hand, others offering quiet words of praise. They asked questions about her music, expressed how it had moved them, even shared personal stories inspired by the melodies she had played. She listened, smiling, feeling a deep sense of fulfillment. The fear that had once held her back had melted into something powerful, a recognition of her own talent and the ability to share it with the world. Walking home that evening, the streets felt alive in a new way. The sky was painted with the colors of sunset, and she felt the soft wind on her face. She reflected on how far she had come from playing alone in her living room to moving a room full of people with her music. She realized that the piano had given her more than just an outlet for her emotions. It had given her a way to communicate, to connect, and to inspire. She felt a quiet determination rising within her, a desire to continue sharing her gift and exploring the depths of her own potential. That night, back at home, she returned to her piano with renewed energy. She played for herself, for the music, and for the joy it brought her. The notes flowed effortlessly, carrying both the excitement of the day and the promise of the future. She understood now that her journey with music was only beginning, and that the path ahead, though uncertain, was full of possibilities. She had discovered the true power of her talent, and she was ready to embrace it fully, letting the piano guide her through every twist and turn of the life she was beginning to imagine. The following weeks were full of surprises. After her recent performance, word had spread beyond her small town. People from nearby areas began to attend the events where she was scheduled to play. Her quiet life was slowly shifting, and she could feel the change in every step she took. Some mornings, she woke up before the sun, filled with nervous anticipation, unsure if she was ready to face the growing audience. Other days, she felt a thrill in her chest, the kind that made her pulse quicken just thinking about the music and the people who would hear it. On one particular day, she arrived at a large hall that felt both intimidating and exciting. Chairs were arranged in neat rows, the stage polished and empty except for the piano that awaited her. As she walked toward it, the quiet hum of conversation filled the space. People were arriving, and the room was buzzing with a mix of curiosity and expectation. She paused for a moment, looking at the instrument. It had always been a friend, but now it seemed to hold a new power, almost commanding attention. She took a deep breath, reminded herself of the countless hours she had spent practicing, and sat down as she lifted her hands over the keys. She noticed how different it felt to perform in front of such a large audience. The room was alive, full of energy and anticipation. She pressed the first note gently, testing the sound, and immediately felt the connection she had grown to trust. The melody began to flow, soft and deliberate, filling the room with a warmth that seemed to reach every corner. People turned their heads, their conversations fading as the music took over. She felt the familiar sense of calm, a bridge between herself and the audience. As if each note was a thread linking her to every listener, she played with intention, letting every emotion pour through her fingers. Some songs were quiet, like gentle whispers of feeling, while others were bold and expressive, carrying urgency and depth. The audience responded instinctively. People leaned forward, their faces attentive, some with eyes closed, feeling the music on a level deeper than words. She could see subtle expressions of joy, surprise, and even tears. It was a moment of shared humanity, where the music became the language everyone understood. With each song, she grew bolder. She experimented with variations in tempo, allowed small pauses to hang in the air, and let certain notes linger longer than expected. The audience followed her every move, caught in the rhythm of the performance. She felt a surge of confidence, realizing that she was no longer just a player of music. She was a storyteller, sharing experiences and emotions that had no other way to be expressed. The piano was an extension of herself, and through it, she was able to reach people in a way that words never could. The room transformed as she continued to play. A quiet energy filled the space, a sense of connection that could be felt in the air. People who had come for casual entertainment found themselves absorbed, leaning in, listening with rapt attention. Children who had been restless became still, their small faces reflecting wonder and curiosity. Adults who often carried the weight of responsibilities and worries seemed to let go for the first time, carried away by the flow of the music. She realized that this was her gift, the ability to move people, to make them pause and feel in a way they might not have experienced in years. As she progressed through her performance, she noticed how different people reacted to the same song in different ways. Some smiled, memories flickering in their minds. Others closed their eyes, lost in thought, perhaps reflecting on their own stories. A few individuals even whispered softly to each other, sharing an unspoken understanding that music had created a moment of intimacy among strangers. It amazed her, this invisible power she held, and it filled her with a sense of purpose that she had never known before, despite the growing crowd and their attentive faces. She felt completely immersed in the music. Her nervousness, which had been present in the early notes, had melted away. Each key she pressed, each chord she formed, felt like a part of herself communicating directly with the room. She was not performing for recognition or applause. She was performing to share, to express, and to connect. That understanding lifted a weight off her shoulders, allowing her creativity and emotion to flow freely. Toward the middle of her performance, she played a piece she had been working on for months. It was a song filled with emotion, a blend of joy, longing, and hope. She had feared it might be too complex or too personal. But as her fingers moved across the keys, the music spoke effortlessly. The audience was captivated. She could see the impact of each note, subtle and profound. A woman near the front wiped a tear. A man in the back shifted forward, leaning into the sound as if trying to absorb it completely. Children watched intently, some tapping their fingers along with the rhythm unconsciously. It was a beautiful, unspoken exchange. She felt grateful for the opportunity to be part of it. By the time she reached the final piece, she was fully confident, fully present, and completely connected to the audience. The song built gradually, layering emotion upon emotion, drawing listeners in and holding them tightly. Each crescendo carried weight, each silence a pause to let feelings settle. She felt the room respond instinctively, caught in the flow of the music, experiencing the story she was telling. It was no longer just a performance. It was a shared experience, a temporary world created by sound and feeling. When the final note faded, there was a moment of stillness, a collective breath held in awe. Then the room erupted in applause, cheers, and admiration. People stood, clapping and smiling, some with tears glistening in their eyes. She felt an overwhelming sense of accomplishment, a mixture of pride, relief, and joy. She had managed to share herself in the truest sense, and the impact was more powerful than she had imagined. For the first time, she fully understood what it meant to move a room. It's not just with skill, but with heart and soul. Afterward, people approached her, offering congratulations and kind words. Some wanted to talk about the music, others shared how it had made them feel, and a few even asked for advice or guidance. She listened, smiling, her heart swelling with gratitude and humility. She realized that her music could reach beyond her own life, touching others, providing comfort, inspiration, and sometimes even healing. It was a responsibility she had not fully understood before, but now embraced fully. Walking home that night, the streets felt different, alive with possibility. The air seemed lighter, the sky brighter, and the world more open than she had ever felt. She thought about how far she had come from playing alone in her room to captivating an audience of strangers. She reflected on the power of music to bridge gaps, to create connections, and to make people feel seen and understood. It was more than talent. It was a gift that could change not just her life, but the lives of everyone who listened. Back at home, she returned to her piano, her hands moving over the keys with renewed energy. She played for herself, for the music, and for the joy it brought her. Each note carried a memory, an emotion, a piece of her heart. She understood now that the journey was ongoing, that there would be challenges and moments of doubt, but also that the music was a constant companion, a source of strength and inspiration. She allowed herself to dream, to explore, and to create freely, knowing that each performance was not just a display of skill, but a conversation between her and the world. In those moments, she felt complete, alive, and ready to embrace whatever the future held. The final performance came on a crisp evening when the air outside was filled with the scent of winter approaching. The hall was larger than any she had played in before, with rows of chairs stretching far back and balconies rising above. People filled the seats slowly, some chatting quietly, others looking around, taking in the grandeur of the space. She felt a familiar mix of nervousness and excitement, twisting of the stomach that reminded her she was alive and that this moment mattered. She clutched her sheet music lightly, took a deep breath, and reminded herself of all the times she had practiced, all the moments of self-doubt that had led to this night. This was her chance to share her gift fully, without fear, without hesitation, as she approached the piano. The light from the stage seemed to settle on the keys, giving them a glow she hadn't noticed before. She sat down carefully, letting her hands rest on the familiar surface. For a moment, she simply breathed, feeling the weight of the hall around her, the eyes of strangers on her, and the music that awaited her touch. She lifted her hands and pressed the first key. The note resonated through the hall, soft, clear, and alive. In that instant, she felt a wave of calm wash over her. The nervousness that had been clinging to her melted into focus, and she let the music take over. She began to play. Slowly at first, allowing the sound to fill the vast space. Each note carried emotion, telling stories of her past struggles, her hopes, and her dreams. The audience began to quiet, some turning toward her, some closing their eyes, all captivated by the sound. She noticed faces change as they listened, expressions softening, hearts opening. And in that moment, she understood the true power of her music. It was more than just sound. It was connection, a language that transcended words. Reaching deep into the hearts of those who heard it, the music grew stronger, more confident, and her fingers moved with a life of their own. She played melodies that soared, notes that danced lightly in the air, and chords that struck deep into the room. The audience responded instinctively. Some leaned forward, as if trying to absorb every detail. Others closed their eyes and let the music flow through them. Children who had been restless were still mesmerized. Adults, burdened with the weight of everyday worries, found themselves carried away. Free in the world she had created through her music, she played a song she had written herself, one she had never shared with anyone before. It was full of longing and hope, pain and joy, all woven together in a delicate balance. As her fingers moved across the keys, she felt the story unfold. Each note a word, each chord a sentence, each pause a meaningful breath. The audience was silent, listening intently, and she felt their emotions mingling with her own. It was a strange and beautiful sensation to feel the hearts of so many people responding to her music in unison. She had never known that her private expressions could touch so deeply. Time seemed to stretch and bend. The room felt suspended in a bubble of sound and feeling. The music was not just hers anymore, it belonged to everyone in the hall. Every rising note lifted them together. Every falling note drew them in closer. She lost herself in the performance, forgetting the world outside, forgetting the applause or judgment, forgetting even herself. All that mattered was the music, the room, and the hearts of the people who were listening. It was as if the world had paused, and for those moments, nothing else existed. She noticed small gestures in the audience that she would never forget. A man in the front row held his hand over his chest, as if to anchor himself in the moment. A woman near the back smiled softly, tears glistening in her eyes. Children leaned closer to the stage, their wide eyes reflecting pure wonder. These subtle reactions were more powerful than any words, and they filled her with both humility and joy. She realized that her music had the ability to create empathy, to awaken feelings that were hidden. To bring strangers together in a shared human experience, the crescendo approached, and she felt her heart race with anticipation and exhilaration. The final piece of the performance demanded everything from her technical skill, emotional depth, and complete presence. She poured herself into the music, letting every thought, feeling, and memory flow through her fingers. The sound rose and fell, built and softened, creating a story that felt both timeless and immediate. She could sense the audience holding their breath, completely absorbed. And that connection gave her the courage to push further, to give everything she had. When the last note echoed into silence, the hall stayed quiet for a heartbeat longer than expected. Then a rush of applause broke out, filling the space with sound. People stood, clapping enthusiastically, some with tears streaming down their cheeks. She felt a wave of relief, pride, and profound joy. The connection she had felt through the music now returned to her in the form of admiration and gratitude. She had shared herself fully, and the response was overwhelming. It was not just applause. It was recognition, understanding, and the validation of every struggle, every practice session, every moment of doubt that had led to this night. After the performance, people approached her, some shyly, others boldly, all wanting to express their feelings. They told her how the music had moved them, how it reminded them of forgotten dreams or long-lost emotions. A few shared stories about their own lives, connecting with the themes of the pieces she had played. She listened, smiling, touched by their honesty and vulnerability. She realized that her music was no longer just a personal expression, it had become a bridge to others, a way to share experiences and emotions, a way to touch lives without words. Walking home later, she reflected on the journey she had taken. From practicing alone in a quiet room to playing in front of a captivated audience, she had grown in ways she could not have imagined. She understood now that her gift was not just about skill, but about courage, vulnerability, and the willingness to share a part of herself with the world. Each performance had taught her something new, not just about music, but about life, connection, and the power of art to move people deeply back at home. She returned to her piano, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. She played slowly, savoring each note, exploring new melodies, and revisiting familiar ones. The music flowed through her, reminding her of the nights she had spent practicing alone, the moments of doubt and fear, and the incredible journey that had brought her to this point. She felt gratitude for the piano, for the audience, for the opportunity to express herself, and for the courage she had found within herself. That night, as she finished playing, she realized that life had changed forever. The music had given her a voice, a way to connect, and a sense of belonging she had never known. She understood that her journey was only beginning, that there would be new challenges, larger audiences, and more opportunities to grow. But she also knew that she was ready. With the piano beneath her fingers and the music flowing from her heart, she could face whatever came next with confidence, passion, and the knowledge that she had the power to move the world one note at a time.